Leonard Stote wasn't the first to crash his plane in Wadhurst. In 1925, a French plane on its way to Paris from Croydon hit a tree and crashed in a field nearby. 3 were killed and several people were injured. To be killed by a falling plane in 1925 must have been the equivalent of being hit by the space shuttle now. Extremely unfortunate. Same result. And on the subject of plane crashes, the town seems to have become a complete aircraft magnet. There were 2 more which took place during the Battle of Britain, both in September of 1940. The first, a Messerschmitt 110, came down at Great Butts Farm, where the pilot, Oberleutnant Hermann Weber, survived and was taken prisoner. After being held in Canada, he lived on to the ripe old age of 92. 1 week later, a second Messerschmitt was brought down, this time by squadron leader Jerry Edge, flying a Hurricane out of RAF Kenley. The German ME 109 crashed in a field at Foxhole Farm. This time the pilot, 23-year-old Herman Seymour, was less fortunate. Unable to escape the burning wreckage when the plane hit the ground, he suffered a horrific death. On September the 16th, 1940, his body was interred in Wadhurst churchyard, recorded in the parish burial register as a German airman, disc number 5329-15, a corner of a foreign field that would be forever Germany. But that wasn't to be either. In 1962, Herman Seymour's remains were exhumed and reinterred at the German Military Cemetery in Cannock Chase, Staffordshire. Just another minor incident in the life of Wadhurst Church, not quite rating a lasting memorial. It's estimated during World War II some 2,000 bombs were dropped on the parish of Wadhurst. Not because the town was being particularly targeted by Hitler, more because bombs were being jettisoned by enemy aircraft returning to bases in Europe. Wadhurst was just en route. 31 doodlebugs also fell in this small area, but the town remained largely untouched, the 900-year-old church unscathed. Derek Banfield is here. Sergeant Pilot Banfield died in September 1944 as a result of a flying accident over Grantham, where he was piloting a Blenheim bomber. He was 22. Alongside him lies Robert Cook, Sergeant Air Gunner. Yet another air accident, nothing to do with combat, this time in a Lancaster bomber over Scunthorpe. Robert Cook died on April the 15th, 1945, only 3 weeks before the end of World War II. Age, just 19. Then, in 1679, another great ironmaster of Wadhurst remembered here is John Legas. While all around him competing furnaces were foundering cannons for the Navy, at his Waldron furnace John Legas concentrated on producing shot. The local Bill Gates of his day. Never mind making computers, sell them the bits that make it work. John prospered. In fact, he prospered to the extent that in 1748 he could afford to donate a golden plate to the church. Unfortunately now, no one seems to know where it is. John Legas lived in the old vicarage in the High Street, probably the premier house in the town. But then, not satisfied with that, he built the magnificent hill house just 100 yards further along the road above it. His wife Judith, formerly Judith Saunders, was 14 years older than him, and they had no children. Their memorial and coat of arms is on the church wall to the right of the clock tower. Or rather, the Saunders half of the coat of arms is there, but Legas' coat of arms is mysteriously blank. Looking closely, it's apparent his coat of arms used to be there, but at some point has been obliterated. To destroy someone's everlasting memorial years after they have died, you might think is a pretty extreme and malicious thing to do. You have to ask yourself why. In John Legas' case, it turns out there are a few pretty good reasons why. A few months before his death at the age of 62, having no children, John's wife Judith persuaded him to bequeath his businesses and wealth to her niece, who then married one Richard Tapsell. I'm sure Tapsell couldn't believe his luck. Anyway, during Tapsell's ownership, it came to light that Legas in his lifetime hadn't been playing strictly by the rules. Not only was he selling cannon and shot to the British Admiralty, but he was making a much bigger profit by, allegedly, selling to the French fighting on the other side. Not a particularly popular thing to do about then, but what a great insight to John Legas. Anyway, you can see why someone might have taken offence at this and scrubbed him out of history. If it was Tapsell who ratted Legas out, then he seems to have come to a suitable end. After lavishing money on Hill House and running the business into the ground, no doubt buying himself a Ferrari, Tapsell went bankrupt in 1765. It had taken him just 14 years to blow through the Legas inheritance. Another perfectly good theory is that the coat of arms were erased by someone who found out that actually John Legas wasn't entitled to it anyway. There is no record of a grant of arms being given to him or anyone else called Legas. He seems to have just made it up. But there is yet another hugely likely suspect, the Reverend Samuel Bush, vicar 1743 to 1783. When Bush was first appointed to the church, there was no vicarage as such, but for a number of years he lodged with Legas at his house in the High Street. Legas was busy building Hill House up the road. When Legas moved to Hill House, he let the vicar stay on in the High Street as his tenant. But they fell out in a huge way, and a few months before he died, Legas turned Bush out onto the street. In truth, Bush seems to have been what you might call the difficult type. He was on bad terms with pretty much all the principal landowners over assorted payments, and consequently found huge difficulty in housing himself anywhere. For a while he lived in the small parvise over the church door, but then he was refused permission even to live there. Ultimately he was given a refuge by William Gurr at Little Pell House just outside of town. But, true to form, Bush fell out with Gurr and found himself back on the street. To be in the universally respected position of vicar and have all the worthies of the town ending up putting you on the street, I think it's safe to assume there was something fairly offensive about the Reverend Samuel Bush. Good news for Bush though. As we know, in 1765 Legas's heir Tapsell has gone bankrupt and is selling up for a song. So Bush is able to buy up the old vicarage, the house he used to rent from Legas and from which Legas threw him out. To celebrate, Bush promptly chopped down a bunch of ancient trees in the churchyard to make furniture for his new pad. Which brings us back to the mystery of the wiped out Legas coat of arms. Have a row with the vicar, a difficult man at best, kick him onto the street and then have him outlive you by 30 odd years, and have him take over your old house? Maybe not conducive to having a long-lasting memorial in the church. Make your own choice. But someone was vindictive enough to scrub the coat of arms from the wall memorial of John Legas. Although you just know Legas wouldn't really have cared. What a fantastic picture of a man. Self-made, a driven businessman with few morals who sold guns to the enemy, didn't suffer fools, made the local vicar homeless, a builder of great houses, generous enough to donate golden plates to the church, self-important enough to pay for a huge stone memorial, and with just sufficient vanity to make up his own coat of arms. I like him a lot.